This budget hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriations Adjudications will now reconvene with the Office of the Attorney General. I want to thank the General for appearing today with her management team, and I want to thank my two colleagues, Vice Speaker Teresa Lahi and Senator Mary Torres, for joining me today. I'll spare you my speech and we'll go directly into your presentation.
Red is hot. Sorry. All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Speaker, and Senator Torres. I know it's been a long day. I've been certainly watching on the live feed. I have with me today, my name is Attorney General Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, Office of the Attorney General, and I have with me my entire management team, and I'm going to just ask them on the record to state your name. Go ahead, starting with Carol.
My name is Carol Hinkle-Sanchez, Deputy AG for the Family Division.
Shannon Taitano, Acting Deputy for Solicitors Division.
Ken Orcutt, I'm the Deputy of the Litigation Division.
Joe McDonald, Deputy for the Criminal Division.
Fred Nishihira, Deputy for the Consumer Protection Division.
Rebecca Perez, Deputy for the Child Support Enforcement Division.
And when you speak a little closer, everybody, but if you're going to present testimony, you're going to need to get up close.
Thomas Polino, General Accounting Supervisor in Admin Division.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Attorney General Carl Espaldon and Chief of Staff Jackie Zonin Cruz are absent as they had approved pre-arranged personal leave for this time, so I hope you will forgive their absence today. We submitted to the committee our written testimony yesterday, and I hope members of the committee have had a time to read or at least peruse our 13-page written testimony. I will not read the entire testimony all over again. Part 1 is our budget. Part 2 is our metrics that we use to measure performance. And Part 3 is our performance highlights per each division. Madam Vice Speaker,
it may have been submitted to us, but it was not distributed to everybody so everybody just got it. So you don't have to read all of the numbers, but at least go through.
I will guide.
Okay.
All right. Part 1 basically starts off with our request of 16.475,176. 82% of that is personnel costs of $13,560,000, and 18% is $2.9 million for operations. The Attorney General's office currently employs 206 warm bodies at a cost of $12,450,151. We currently have we have 13 vacancies, actually 15 vacancies. Is that 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 17 vacancies, costing $917,296. These are the vacancies, Senators, that we have frozen since the implementation of the austerity measures in March of this year. We have had to do so in order to make our contribution to the government's financial difficulties of $1.4 million. We are currently operating at a $14.8 million budget, down from $16.2 as approved and authorized by the legislature. We have asked the governor's office to release $400,000 of the $1.4 million held or reserved in order to fill the 17 vacancies. As you can see in the vacancy dynamics, there are 6, primarily made up of 6 assistant attorney generals. We have 2 vacancies in prosecution, 2 vacancies in litigation, 2 vacancies in the solicitor division. We also have 2 vacancies for victim advocates in the newly formed Victim Notification Unit. We have 2 positions, a program coordinator and a clerk for the Victim Service Center at administration, and 7 positions in child support that are 66% matched against our local funding of $34,000 in child support. The 6 vacant attorney positions continue to be the most difficult positions for us to recruit because of the Competitive Wage Act. We have improved our ability to attract applicants. Unfortunately, because of the lower pay at entry level for senior attorneys at Attorney 4 and Attorney 3, we make an offer and the offer is not accepted. I'd say that the rate of rejection is a 50-50 for off-island candidates. On-island candidates, we get them in, and I'm so pleased that, of course, our priority is to hire any on-island applicants that are interested in seeking employment and are rated acceptable under the merit system. B is our fixed assets. We have a $1.2 million rent. We have bar dues. We can just go down the line, drug testing, our publications, particularly since we are a law office, we need to do publications and, of course, for procurement and bidding. Our membership dues to the National Association, the Conference of Western AGs. I just go down the line, and these are the normal fixed and recurring operational cost. And under a zero-based budget, I know that the speaker, you wanted us to show in as much detail as possible what we all need $2.9 million for. Our fixed operations is $2.1 million. The next page is our technology needs. We share the system with the Judiciary of Guam under the CJIS Integrated Project, our Westlaw for searching legal research. Our Justware is also tied in primarily the Family Division and Prosecution Division to the Superior Court of Guam. And the LERMS software is where we pull most of the police reports. Now, these technology needs usually go up about 5% every year. It represents to us $271,873 for those shared technology costs. Contractual, because we are a law firm again, we need court transcribers. We also have court interpreters for both the Family Division and the Prosecution Division. They are the highest use of interpreters. Transcribers for both litigation and prosecution because of the numerous appeals. I think every criminal case that we win is appealed, just about. Experts in litigation cases, experts in conflict cases as well, expert witnesses and conflict attorneys, excuse me. Travel for witnesses, this again is trial travel for prosecution. We have travel for litigation at $5,000, and that is dedicated primarily to the plebiscite case. We don't have travel, any other local travel in any other division. So the travel we currently have is dedicated to trial matters. We have asked for continued funding in the plebiscite case of $30,000. That case is to be argued late October this year. And this is a new request, not previously asked for in our current FY18 budget. Because the lawsuit was just filed last September. The Chamorro Land Trust case, we are asking $120,000 to fund that matter. Subsection E is equipment, restorative justice, workbooks and material for the program that the Family Division in Carroll runs and trying to keep kids out of being charged in court and getting them into restorative justice programs. I think Joe can talk a little bit more about the FISIN, prosecution trial experts, and Celebrate software how we investigate and dig into computer hardware like cell phones and laptops. Ending part one on our budget is a heavy-duty shredder. This is important for us to lessen our footprint in outside storage areas of our boxes. We've been able to reduce 15,000 boxes that are in storage off-site at DeWitt down to about 12,000, and I know that we continue to shred as much as we can. We are looking to reduce those 12,000 boxes down by another 2,000 to 3,000 in 2019. We do need to upgrade our servers. We are a high computer operated law firm, and we work and function on the ability of our computers to function well. We continue our training under the procurement statute. We want to train 4 more of our staff. I think we have already trained 3, if not more than that. 2. All right, we've trained 2. They've gone through the GCC training, and we would like funding to train more of our administrative staff. And the others are IRS fingerprinting and child support guidelines review and revision, 34,000. Metrics performance. This is kind of how we try and track our rate of return. Our rate of return for every dollar that we are given in our office. We track it by workload output. We track it by data that comes through our office, such as government claims paid, denied, or settled, lawsuits that we either win or lose that bears on the general fund, consumer complaints that we're able to resolve and settle, our criminal injuries compensation funds received and awards given out. Of course, there's the tobacco master settlement funds, criminal fines, penalties, and restitution judgments, and on and on. If you have any questions about the metrics, I'd be more than glad to answer that. What I would like to do, though, is I would like to get to the performance, because I think this bears more on perhaps what the committee would like to know as to how the Attorney General's office is performing. And, Senator, if you don't mind, I would like to have the division deputies, as they have done previously, give you their performance highlights. And I'd like to ask each deputy, as you begin, just to synopsize, don't take too long, because we have a lot of deputies here, indicate the amount of our appropriations that is dedicated to your division. And Senators, we divide the budget into an amount per each division, and in doing so, we can then try to determine the rate of return of a particular division based on their budget that they are given. All right, Carol, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Senators. Basically, the family division, which was once upon a time the juvenile division, now also handles matters involving mental health, which is why we were returned back to the name family division. We took over mental health matters in 2016. Basically, the matters that we do represent, the director of Guam Behavioral Health, as well as his representatives, are the cases involving issues where placement or evaluations or any type of matter is brought up before the criminal mental health court. And we basically advocate to ensure that mental health, we advocate on behalf of Guam Behavioral to ensure that the proper processes are followed before these determinations are made, because we want to protect, of course, the residential treatment fund that's being used and ensure that that's the appropriate placement that is deemed by the professionals. That's basically one of the things we have done for mental health. This year, we're going to file a couple of cases utilizing the Baby Alexa law, which is our assisted outpatient treatment. It's a new, it was, of course, enacted in 2014, but we're now going to, we have cases that would fit these types of civil proceedings. So we're going to be initiating those types of actions to ensure that, you know, of course, we prevent these individuals from not getting the treatment they need and entering back into the criminal justice system. So those are things that we're currently doing. We're working on other areas where we're trying to revamp mental health, not just with respect to the adults, but also to the children. We're looking at ways that we can better assist families when it comes to individuals or children with mental health issues. The other thing that the other program that our division implemented in the past 2 years is the restorative justice, which I believe was Speaker Cruz's legislation. We've implemented our HERO program, which is healing, empowering, rehabilitating, and overcoming. These are for our first-time low-risk offenders that commit crimes, whether it's status offense or just criminal delinquency matters. These juveniles are afforded an opportunity to be diverted out of the court system, so they not once will touch the court system. They will be handled through our investigators at this time, which is why we're also asking for the social work position so that they can assist in the monitoring and tracking of these matters. If you look at our statistics on the restorative justice program, we were able to divert almost 50% of our cases in 2000, and just this past year, if you look at the numbers from 2016 to this year, we filed 427 cases in 2016, which dealt with juveniles who committed crimes, delinquency matters, or drug and alcohol related offenses. This year, for 2017, we filed 287, so that's a huge, significant decrease in the amount of filings. Those kids were either diverted into the HERO program or were brought into court on a violation on a current case, so that where they can be treated and provided the proper services under that case. Our non-status offenses also decreased as well. It went from, if I can get the numbers for you, I believe it decreased. I don't have the numbers up front with me, and I apologize. But it went down from, it went from 94 filings in 2016 to 48 in 2017. So we decreased the areas of filing where there was non-status, or where it was status offenses such as beyond control and a curfew. So basically, if you look at that, it's really, it's cost-saving measures taken, but not just that, holding them accountable and ensuring that low-risk offenders are not placed into a system where it's only going to cause them to, disrupt them and cause them to become criminals. We want to make sure we keep them out of the system and give them the proper services and treatment they need. And that's basically, if you have any other questions for me on that, I can answer that for you guys. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Speaker, Vice Speaker, and Senators. The Solicitors Division is requesting $2 million to describe the division of solicitor. We are tasked with providing legal services and guidance to government agencies. We do contract review, opinion requests, information and guidance, procurements, and we represent agencies in termination cases before the Civil Service Commission and appear on behalf of agencies before the public auditor. In 2017, the division performed a total of 454 contract reviews, 118 attorney assistance requests, and 82 procurement requests. The division has also provided training in procurement, open government law, Freedom of Information Act, and the administrative adjudication law. We are currently working on our templates to provide to agencies and hope to distribute that soon. That's, in a nutshell, what the Solicitor Division does, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Speaker, Vice Speaker, and Senators. The Litigation Division defends cases brought against the government of Guam in court, and also defends individual Guam officials and employees who are accused of doing wrongful acts within the scope of their employment, such as negligent acts and getting into things like car accidents. In the testimony submitted to you today, I've set forth several of the high-profile cases that the Litigation Division is involved in. One is the plebiscite case, Arnold Davis versus Government of Guam and the Guam Election Commission. That case is currently before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We anticipate that oral argument will be held in October. That's a case where Judge Gatewood held that Guam's plebiscite statute was unconstitutional in violation of the Voting Rights Act. Another related case in terms of indigenous rights and rights of Chamorros is the United States of America versus the Government of Guam and Chamorro Land Trust Commission case. That case was just entering into the discovery phase. We had a court conference, phone call conference with the magistrate judge who was based in Hawaii this morning. The court has entered a stay of discovery pending the parties filing cross motions for judgment on the pleadings. Judgment on the pleadings is kind of it's like a summary judgment motion, only it's just based upon the answer and complaint that have been filed in the case. The schedule set by the court we'd probably have oral argument probably sometime late in the year, maybe October or November. The judge indicated that the Hawaiian judge would probably want to come out to Guam to hear oral arguments, although the judge we talked to today at the conference is not the actual judge who would hear the motion. The third case I think that is well worth mentioning is the CERCLA lawsuit. That's the Government of Guam versus the United States of America. That was a case that is pending for the District of Guam Federal District Court and District of Columbia District Court in Washington, D.C. The federal government in that case filed a dispositive motion to try to dismiss the case based on statute of limitations. We had our outside counsel attorneys that we've hired in this case argued that case about, I don't know, just a few weeks ago for 2 hours. The Attorney General and I got up in the middle of the night and listened to oral argument. Our consensus is that oral argument went very, very well. We believe the judge, based upon the oral argument, is probably going to deny the federal government's motion to dismiss on statute of limitations grounds. So that's, I think, we're optimistic that we're going to get some good news out of that case. The other case I think I just mentioned in passing, I think the courts, this body is well aware of, but we did conclude last fiscal year the consent decree case involving Guam's prison, which had been going on for several decades. It involved, the Attorney General was involved in that litigation back in the 1990s as well as it was I. So it was very gratifying that the court finally dismissed that action after all those years and all the effort that went into getting Guam into compliance with the consent decree as to conditions at DOC. So unless you have questions for me, that's really all I have to say today. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, Senator Nelson, Vice Speaker Terlai, Speaker Cruz, and Senator Mary Camacho Torres. The Criminal Division, or the Prosecution Division, of course, is charged with reviewing all of the cases that are referred to us from every law enforcement agency and also from private individuals, and making the initial determination on whether this case is worthy of investigating, and if so, taking this to prosecution after working up the investigation. We currently have about 3,000 cases, and as I provided, or the General has provided in her transmittal, that amounts to about $1,800 on average per case. So if you think about that for a second, that includes all of the referrals, sifting through the weed and the chaff and getting to the important cases and charging those out. The judiciary released its figures that definitely show a trend, at least stabilized trend in felonies, but a decreasing trend in the misdemeanors, and that's come about by a concerted focus on charging the more important crimes and taking a little bit more time to work these crimes up to a better state as we proceed to trial. We expect to be referred as much as 5,000 cases, and we've given you some statistics in the General's transmittal that you're able to review. We're asking the legislature to provide to the division $5.5 million, which is going to cover our prosecutors. We have 21 currently. We're seeking to add 2 more to that. As we know, the temporary admission allows for only 5 years to serve as a government attorney, and so we see a great deal of turnover on a year-to-year basis on the number of attorneys that we have. If you were actually to look at the average attorney level that we have in the prosecution division, it's barely over a 2. So these attorneys are young, but they get experienced very fast, and I'm so proud to say that we have a great group of attorneys at this time, and they're working really well. They, of course, are supported by 11 investigators and the bulk of the 61 staff, paralegals, and administrative staff, and I'm so happy to say that we now have the victim notification unit in full swing. So we're in constant contact with our victims, informing them to the extent that they'll give us good information about where they are, exactly what's happening with their cases, immediately post-charge, as we head into the pleading and other important stages of the trial. The challenges basically are going to be with continued staffing and having to deal with a scrunched budget. Of course, if you look at that $1,800 figure, you think about that for a second. And that's what we're throwing at all of these cases on average. And it's an amazing job that the attorneys and the staff do. So we thank the legislature for every dollar that's given, and we assure you that every dollar that's provided is spent in a very good way.
Good afternoon, Fred Nishi here from Consumer Protection Division. I guess, Mr. Speaker, our primary function is basically to look after the everyday citizen and whether the businesses are treating them fairly. So that's our primary mission, if I had to put it simply. It's difficult to measure performance because we do it for an individual as opposed to the government of Guam. So it's when we, for example, if there is a consumer files a complaint because his brand new car has so many problems within the 30 days period, and we have a dealership that basically grants the consumer a new car. How do you put a measurement on that? Because we get nothing from the government of Guam, but it is as a result of coming through the Consumer Protection Division that consumer is served. But we do so much more. You've heard me talk about the tax and the identity fraud that occurs. We do that on a daily basis. We take those in. We actually review each and every class action that is filed within all the U.S., whichever circuit it may be involved with. We actually take a look, and the purpose we take a look at each and every class action is because there is always a sliver of hope that the government of Guam may be beneficiary, especially when it comes to pharmaceutical companies. And so we do write to the Department of Public Health, to the hospital, to our behavioral health, and inform them that if you are using these pharmaceuticals, you may want to be part, and if they respond, we will respond appropriately. The other new things that I'd like to report is we have been given, thank you, Madam AG, a new attorney 1. And so we increased from 1 attorney to 2 on board as staff. As a direct result of that, we've been able to now work into going for victim restitution for, let's see, victims of crimes who have the offender coming off the parole system. Currently, we only service victims who are coming off, inmates who came from the probation area. So if you look at my request for a budget for this year, I've asked for some additional staff because what that means basically is I'm going to double our caseload to service twice as many victims because we're going to bring on all of the parole system. We're ready to go. I've informed the AG. I don't have the staff. I mean, TAP tapped out. And without staff, it would not be fair to not only the employees, but I would not be prepared, or we would not be prepared to go to court on these restitution cases. And finally, we are involved with collections within the government of Guam. I know it doesn't sound like consumer protection, but under the consumer protection law, government of Guam is also listed as a consumer. And so we've actually worked with Rev and Tax on tax collection. We're working with Rev and Tax with the tobacco stamp tax that's going to be going in place. I know it's running behind, but we are working in conjunction, and that's because the consumer protection also enforces the master settlement agreement. So we work hand in hand with them on there. And I know I said that was the last one, but one final one. We are kind of like the training arm for the Attorney General's office, with the exception of child support. So we do get heavily involved with training for adverse action, for procurement. And you've seen our outreaches such as It's the Law. Code Adam is something we just introduced. And whenever you see victim outreach, our office is right there along with Child Support Services, who I'm turning over to my sister here.
Thank you, Work Brother Fred. Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Perez, again, the Deputy Attorney General for the Child Support Enforcement Division. Our role is to represent the interests of the government in cases for the establishment and enforcement of child support orders, where a party to the case has either applied for services, has been a party who has received government assistance under TANF, and therefore has assigned case rights to our office, or where there are other child support offices who refer cases to us because a party perhaps might be on Guam for collection. We are currently fully staffed with 8 attorneys in the Child Support Enforcement Division, and we have been now for close to 3 years, I think, without interruption. And we are really, really pleased that we've reached that level. We have had some turnover, but we're fortunate enough to be able to fill those slots quickly, and therefore have achieved a full slate of attorneys, which has allowed us to have some consistency in our office with how we practice on a daily basis. With regard to informing people about what it is that we do, we have continued what we started a couple of years ago, which is conducting monthly workshops to explain the child support process. It's open to the public. We publish the schedule. It's really just meant to be a very basic introduction to what's involved in having a child support case, and hopefully take the mystery out of child support for our consumers, because they are mostly unrepresented by counsel. We have been working very hard to improve customer service to both phone calls, through phone calls and walk-ins. And we're on the second year of what was a very successful collaboration with the Judiciary of Guam to make a change in the courtrooms in which our cases are heard. We really wanted to work to encourage parent participation, and working with Judiciary, when our courtroom moved up to the northern satellite just earlier this year, we were able to keep the tables kind of at an even level, so that our parents, when they come in, they're on an even level with the hearing officer, and are hopefully, and anecdotally from the information we've received, they feel more comfortable participating in their own case, as they should. We have issued an RFP for a child support guideline review and update that has been a long time coming. Hopefully we can close out that procurement and begin that shortly before or shortly after the close of the fiscal year. As for numbers, in fiscal year 2017, we had 6,662 active open cases. Our total collections were $10,310,282, which included federal tax garnishments, tax refund garnishments of $467,344, and local tax refund garnishments of $1,038,833. This contributed to us being able to recover and reimburse the government for previously expended TANF funds in the amount of $302,531. For the next fiscal year, we are requesting a total of $6,921,281 for operations. The effect of that on the local government is only the 34% local match, which comes out to $2,237,792. So if you have any further questions, I am available.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the administrative division, the last two sections in Part 3, I'll just very briefly go over this. The administrative division, made up of 28 staff employees, is the core mothership of the agency of 209 employees. We have a well-functioning HR division, federal grants division, MIS, our technology section. We have our support staff, of course. Administration also takes care of the criminal history clearances, the family violence registry, the notary administration, the criminal injuries compensation fund, and the postmortem commission as well. We also take care of some victim services. We also take care of the Victim Service Center. The office is now bringing in non-child support federal grants about $4.9 million. If you'll look at the, and this money comes from various grants, primarily victims of crime, but we also get federal grants from STOP, the Burn Grant. We have a VOCA discretionary grant, a USDA, Department of Interior TAP grant, and the Highway of Office Safety. In the last 3 years, in 2015, the VOCA grant brought in $1.9 million. That has all been awarded out. 2016, 1.2, also all awarded. And in 2017, we're in the process of issuing a $1.1 million again in VOCA grants. And Senators, we expect a $1.8 million VOCA grant to be awarded to the territory by 2018. So the office needs to be prepared to also get that grant out. So I think that's quite significant in terms of the work of the administration division. Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund, Senators, is working operational. We've issued $382,000, $245 to victims of crime. About half of that has gone to the Guam Memorial Hospital, and the other another portion went to the Guam Regional Center. So what happens if a victim has hospital bills that haven't been paid, that money goes directly to Guam Memorial Hospital. So we've given a little over $150,000 to Guam Memorial Hospital. Peter John is always happy when he gets a little text from me, and GRMC likewise. And I believe that wraps up an overview of our Office of the Attorney General, and you will notice that the 16.475 request is $200,000 less than our submittal of March. I did sit down with the staff, and I actually cut a little bit more last night that I forgot to tell my DAGs. There are no new positions, so we're going to have to work from within. Senators, and we open ourselves up to any questioning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I thank you for cutting your initial request. In the FRP that we suffered earlier this year, the cut for the AG's office was 1.4?
1.4. We are operating under a 14.8.
And how is the operation with that?
We've asked the governor's office, we sent a letter about a week or 2 weeks ago for a release of $400,000 so that we could fill the current 17 vacancies, the attorney vacancies, victim advocates. And if we get that $400,000, we will, my understanding is, make it through this budget year, but we would not be able to make it into the next FY19. Please understand, Senators, that the 16.2 authorized, this is the second year that we've had 16.2. If we go into a rollover, we'll take a rollover. I've asked my staff, can we do a rollover and cut and be very frugal with everything? Senator, we can do that. 16.4 is what we hope that we can operate with. The next Attorney General, I'd hate to strap that next Attorney General with anything less than a 16.2 or a $16 million budget.
Since you brought up the topic of the next Attorney General, I'm sure you watched the last budget hearing I just had with the Office of the Public Guardian. Mm-hmm. And her two first assistants, well, I don't know how she got two, but, oh, you have two. I thought there was only going to be one first assistant. What are the plans in the budget as it relates to those two positions?
The Chief of Staff?
Yep.
And the only position that I'm requesting that the legislature create for the next Attorney General is the Chief of Staff position as an unclassified. Currently, the law provides for the Special Assistant to the Attorney General as an unclassified under 4102, as well as the Private Secretary to the Attorney General. The Chief of Staff currently is filling the slot of the number 2 position in the agency of a Chief Deputy, since I do not have a Chief Deputy. So that's the slot that the person's in. Now, the next Attorney General, if that AG would like to have a Chief Deputy, then that Attorney General would not be able to have a Chief of Staff. And so I have someone who will be out of a job, put it that way, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I understand that. At the risk of upsetting some of your other staff, how was it received that your Chief of Staff and your Special Assistant, who are not attorneys, could be receiving salaries in excess, I mean, much greater than your attorneys 1, 2, and some attorney 3 positions?
Well, I'll tell you, Senator, I don't think an attorney 1, 2, 3, or 4 would want to have the Chief of Staff job. It's an extremely difficult job to operate the office. I can't answer that. Certainly any of my deputies can respond to your very poignant question. Okay. I have not heard any negative.
Okay. No, because you mentioned in your testimony that you're having difficulty recruiting, mm-hmm. but the salary that you're paying your Chief of Staff is greater than the salary that the CWA provides for Attorney 3s, if memory serves me right.
Yes, it is. It is an unclassified position, and it pretty much administratively assists the Attorney General in the full operation of about a $26 million budget with 206 to 215 employees.
Yesterday we had a very lively hearing on special funds. What's the current balance in the unclaimed child support?
In the undistributed collections, still near $5 million. We do have plans, and we had talked about this, I know, at least at the last hearing, to engage in consultant services for a review of how, because these go back to 91, 96, what steps should be taken according to financial industry standards to identify what funds, where we could identify parties for the recovery of those funds before we would entertain what to do with them when they cannot be identified. It has not increased, and I do not have those numbers exactly with me, but it was close to that amount, I believe, when I started, and for the last 4 years it's increased slightly, but not, the bulk of it still remains from decades ago, quite frankly.
And have we watched it carefully to make sure
every day? My state disbursement unit, which is the group of people who are responsible for tracking money in and money out of the child support trust account, do keep track and do their daily batch reconciliations. We have not encountered any unauthorized takings from the government of Guam, and where we have encountered For example, there might be we have people who pay with electronic fund transfers, and where we encounter situations where money was put in and then was taken out, because that's how electronic banking transactions work. We have addressed those within a relatively short period of time. So it is, my unit is tasked, the State Disbursement Unit is tasked with keeping a daily tally on money in and money out of that account.
And Senator, that works also for the criminal injuries compensation, which currently has $1.4 million, and that is secure based on the legislation that you had imposed.
Well,
we do track it.
Maybe one of the senators will probably ask you the question, how can we secure it? Because
I heard that question earlier.
yes, and because we use boilerplate creation of these special funds and say it shall not be available for transfer by Imagatlahi, it's separate and apart, and all the same bells and whistles for those two accounts. And we're trying to, I'm not sure whether or not yours is saying it's there, but it's just a paper entry as opposed to real cash.
I think maybe they're scared of the Office of the Attorney General, or the fact, I think one of the reasons why you've preserved this is that the child support money is not taxpayer, it's not general fund, nor is the criminal injuries. It doesn't derive from revenues of the government of Guam. And so I can certainly understand 2.5 years ago, the anger of this legislature, as well as my office, that these non-revenue funds were taken. The question you're asking is, how do you better protect revenue funds when they're put in an account and the words are kept separate and apart? I think the OPA, you asked a very good question of the OPA, does she have her own checking account? And she says yes, they cannot touch that. The Attorney General's office funds that come from general revenue are all handled by Department of Administration. We are in the process, and I have just seen the RFP that we want to get out for our own financial system. Does that mean that you want every particular line agency to have their own financial system? I don't think that's appropriate. The Attorney General's office, as an elected position, as with the OPA, should have its own financial system. I think, Senator, one way of doing that is the bank accounts, and how do you keep those bank accounts separate and apart?
You touched on it slightly, but would you expand on this RFP, the $25,000? You have an RFP out, and it's in this budget request. Was it in the previous budget? Because we didn't see it in the last budget. In the last budget. So how do you have an RFP out for something that we hadn't?
Are you not talking about child support? You're talking
No,
about
I'm talking about the financial management system, $25,000.
All right, Tom, where's the money coming from? It's in the, could you?
It was in the 18 budget, part of the contractual.
Under contractual?
Yes.
Okay. And you're asking for $20,000 for the new swipe pin cameras?
Yes, that's security for our various floors, Tom. It's a security system for all the floors. Senators are now open. It used to be you'd go to the 7th floor and someone would have to guide you up. All the floors are now open, so we needed some greater security in days of post 9/11 with what's the word, Joe? Workplace violence, what is it? Active shooter? Active shooter. We've had a couple of instances of concern, and so this assists with active shooter.
Okay. Madam Vice Speaker?
Senator, may I bring up one, and I think it's very important for me to bring it up now. I spoke to the Vice Speaker yesterday, and I gave her a phone call, and it's with regard to child support. There's going to be a separate standalone budget request with regard to child support, and I'd like Rebecca to explain what that request is. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Currently, and you can see, if you'll excuse me, I'll find it on the page 5. No. On page 3 of our submission, page 3 of 13, you can see that for the fixed and recurring operational costs, down at the CSED APOSI system, APOSI refers to our current case management system, which was put in our office in the 90s, certified in 2004. And it is federally certified and has to perform certain functions, which I would be happy to explain in much greater detail if you'd like it another time. But essentially, we were dealing with a case management system that costs a lot of money to maintain. And to sum that up, really in the most top-level summary, it's maintained in a programming code that is severely outdated. It would be what's referred to as a legacy system. We're not the only government office, I think, locally or in the nation that uses those, but what happens is because it's proprietary and older, the pool of people who can maintain it and the cost to make changes to it as system requirements come up is very high, and there's just not a large pool of it. Many states for both child support and I think other government systems have moved to open, I believe the term is open source coding. And what that means is that then you can do program enhancements and maintenance at a much lower cost. We had in previous budget submissions, not in the last year, I believe we took it off track, talked about an 8 to 10 year plan for full system replacement. And what had happened was we got estimates, we got projections doing feasibility studies and initial cost benefits analysis that full system replacement could cost in excess of $75 million. And there are some states where it's cost over $100 million. And even with a 66% match from the federal government, that's $34 million, which is a lot of money, and we're having problems finding hundreds of thousands for certain things. So we have done some research, and we took some of our federal funds and went and looked at some state systems where something called platform migration has come into play. And what that means is you don't get a new fancy system with real-time dashboards and drop-down menus like you would see on any computer you buy now, but it does migrate the coding of the system into open source and more widely available code. And if that happens, we would expect that there would be a resulting drop in the cost to maintain it as well as lesser costs to do necessary enhancements to the system. The explanation that I just gave is, again, very, very broad, and I think that if there were questions about it, we have decided with Madam AG to do a standalone request for it because there is a lot more to talking about what it involves. But right now we're at $478,618 local share. Our current contract to maintain the APOSI system year to year is $1.3 million. I can't speak what it's going to be at next year because we just issued an RFP for those services and are in the process of that procurement. But it's expensive, and we realize that asking for $34 million with the kind of financial constraints that our local government is going through is, talk about a pipe dream. But I need a bigger pipe for that. But we think that $3.4 million to get us to a point where we can start complying with modern security requirements and current federal requirements for the system would be a little bit more reasonable.
And Senator, I understand this is the worst time to be, bringing this. I just didn't want to be at this committee meeting and then we asked the Vice Speaker to introduce a bill, and you're wondering why didn't we even say that. So it's a standalone appropriation. And Rebecca, what did the Fed say about a timeline? How soon are we expected to do this?
The timeline for actual replacement or modernization is kind of nebulous and left to it, but I can tell you that currently our system is already so sorely in need of upgrades for software that we have been cited by the IRS for non-compliance, and it's going to cost a fair amount of money for us to get natural-based programming language security enhancements that will meet IRS Office of Safeguard requirements, and that we are on a strict timeline for that. We're actually at the point where we are reporting to them in writing just today, and we'll be having 2-week to monthly follow-ups on that. So
sorry I have to bring that up, but wanted to be able to lay it on the table. Okay.
I was going to ask about that 478 because it was a large sum. that you went down and you talked about some of the 2000 ones, but then, so Vice Speaker.
All right. If you could just go back to the 25,000 for the financial system, that was already in the 2018, but you weren't able to use it? Or is this an ongoing
Developing
cost?
the specification, so we've been in the process of writing the specification. I think the specs are pretty close to final. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, it is. The 25,000 is actually our projected system maintenance for that financial management system for FY19. We have the funds in this year, and that's why we're doing the RFP, and hopefully we'll issue by June 28th.
And what is the cost then? Is that in addition to the 25,000 maintenance?
No, that would be maintenance for FY19. For 18, can I discuss the costs?
Is there, prior to?
Oh, you're going to send out an RFP,
Yeah.
so you don't want
Yes,
to
we're sending out
announce
an RFP.
I see. In 2018, you're going to do that?
Yes, in this month.
All
this
right.
year.
And then, so Rebecca, this posse system is costing $478,000 local share for maintenance, but you were looking at a system that's going to cost us $3.4 million annually, or what's that? Once? Or?
That would be an estimate, and again, those are loose numbers because we would issue an RFP for that. So, what we envision is that some states that have engaged in platform migration, and this information would go into greater detail, of course, when we made the request for the actual appropriation, have been able to achieve the platform migration with certain system enhancements post-migration for costs below $10 million. And the interesting thing is, even when we talk about states that have a much larger caseload, because the system has to be federally certified, there are certain base functions that need to happen, so it's not always based on the number of cases. But we think that getting us into current compliance with system requirements on a platform migration project we think it's reasonable to assume it could be done for $10 million or less. And so 3.4 and the one time. System maintenance thereafter would be a cost, but our estimates are that once we move to an open source language or a platform or a system that could be maintained with a wider pool of competitive vendors, that then the cost, which is currently $1.3 million a year, would go down. So $1.3 million has been a continuing and occurring cost over the last few years for the maintenance systems and operations maintenance of a posse.
Sorry, so what's the 478? I thought that was the maintenance cost.
Well, it's a 34%.
Oh, you're talking about the total. Okay, yes, all right.
Right, because we also do subscribe to software licenses, and there are other costs that are associated with keeping the system running.
So you're hoping that it's going to be less than the posse maintenance.
Yeah, and unfortunately, again, I can't predict the future, but what we're looking at is because natural-based coding language is, I don't want to use the term ancient, and I don't want to speak really in too much detail to computer and coding and other things like that, because I'm not the IT person. But my understanding of it is, if we were an open source language, and one example I think is C#, there would be a wider pool of people who could perform system enhancements and maintenance.
But the theory is to spend $3.4 million one time, and then hopefully get a less than the 478,000 local share maintenance annually.
Yes, and as an example, UIFSA, which refers to our intergovernmental cases, and other requirements that have been introduced in the last few years for federal systems, we've seen estimates that it would cost over $100,000 just to make that change in a posse now, because it takes so much to make that happen in this very, very old legacy system. So we would hope that that cost could incorporate that as well to get us up to date.
All right, and relatively minute compared to that is there's an item, contractual service, 132,721. Is that the same thing the speaker was talking about? Is that for cameras, or what is that for? Contractual services increased by 132,000.
Senator, are you looking at division contractual? Or are you looking at,
I thought that was in the overall.
are you looking at CSED?
Do you see it? I'm not sure. Sorry. I guess I can send that to you.
Okay.
I have to look through all the different divisions. No one knows offhand?
What was the question again, Senator?
There's a $132,000 increase in contractual services. And I guess I'm just asking, what's the increase?
Last year it was 2.8, now it's 3.07.
It might be, as Deputy Attorney General Nishihira points out, that we've asked for funding for the first time for the Chamorro Land Trust. So the contractual has increased significantly.
There's 120,000
Yes.
in that, in the presentation that you,
Yes.
that you provided.
Yes.
Who's the expert?
Who is
Or
the expert?
What expert are you going to be getting for that? Or,
okay.
or is that going to be a contractual attorney that you're going to, is it a private bar member that you're going to?
We're anticipating non-attorney experts. We've actually retained the services of 2 experts as consulting experts, and they're at this point they're willing to do it for no cost. That's been one of the things we've done in terms of trying to deal with the current budget problems that the government's having. Long term, I'm not sure that's a viable expectation to have these people agree to basically work for free. I'm also anticipating that we may need 2 other experts, but some of that is dependent upon what kind of experts the United States comes up in terms of trying to deal with the fair housing claim in the Chamorro Land Trust Act. So some of these are anticipated, some of them are actually on board already as consulting experts. So I'm anticipating perhaps as many as 4 experts. But obviously this figure is a soft figure. I mean, we don't know at this point what it would cost.
At the current time, we don't have an anticipated outside counsel. We are looking at actual experts in the history of land use on Guam right now.
With that being said, this budget year you gave us the flexibility to use sole source for experts. I think we're gonna, we're requesting if we could also have that same flexibility. I actually had, maybe Ken wanted to request to expand that even more.
Yes, that's been one of the reoccurring problems that we run into in litigation, is being able to hire experts without going through a competitive process that's contemplated under the current procurement law. The 2 problems we're having, one is simply time constraints. It's difficult to go through the procurement process and find the expert when you have case scheduling deadlines by which experts have to be disclosed. It's also advantageous, I've found, in doing litigation to have experts on board early to help you develop such things as discovery questions and defenses. So the longer we wait to hire an expert, I think it hurts our ability to defend cases. And then the other problem with experts is that all experts are not the same. It's not really a fungible good. Some experts are better than others. I've had experience in the mainland. I was with the Washington State Attorney General's office for 10 years in their torts division, and we had a well-established connections and networks to experts. And so there are simply experts that I am aware of that are really good for certain types of cases that could really help the government, and yet time after time, I've found it difficult to actually just, I can't just pick up the phone and say, hey, I really have this case I'd like you to look at. I have to go through a competitive process, and it's just been a real problem. I would love to have the ability to hire experts that I want to hire, that I think will do a good job in helping defend the government's interests in a case, and I haven't really been able to do that.
Mr. Speaker, I think you used the word game changer when we were taking care of the Department of Corrections, so being able to hire those kinds of experts, and I appreciate the waiver from the procurement for experts in litigation. It was very, very helpful. So if that authorization is expiring this year, we would like to ask for it to continue.
Well, thank you for the update on the cases. Could I ask you about one more, and that is the gaming license case?
The gaming license case is still before the Guam Supreme Court. They had oral argument, I believe it was a month or two ago, and so we're simply waiting a decision from the court. We're optimistic on how that one's going to come out too.
I think you had told us before that even if you win in the Supreme Court, the case must go on. I mean, it's not done. It's going to continue in the Superior Court. That was only over counsel, isn't that correct?
The current case before the Guam Supreme Court is indeed about counsel and who should pay for counsel. So before the Guam Superior Court is still a pending summary judgment motion that the government filed that's never been heard. And so if it goes back, I think the first business, hopefully, of the Superior Court will be to finally rule on that summary judgment.
Okay.
And if we win that, then that should invalidate the rules and regulations, and it should resolve much of the conflict that's gone on between intergovernment on that case.
All right. Is it possible for the legislature to receive, as a matter of course, all the pleadings in the cases, kind of like attorneys sending it to their clients, copies of the pleadings in these civil cases, the civil litigation, not necessarily the criminal, but the civil, the big cases?
I think we can certainly work with our staff on something like that. It would be really nice if we were in the same process as the district court, the federal district court, where those notices all go out to certainly the parties.
Yes.
But I know you've been asking for that, and it sounds like we have not been able to give you what you needed. We'll get to that, Senator.
Yes. If you could, one of the tricks I think I'm thinking about is if you send these notices to the speaker, they're put onto a website and they're going to be maintained forever. So that also assists in future research when they want to know what happened in these cases. They can track that. Well, actually now I take it back. The Superior Court's supposed to be able, we're supposed to be able to search now for Superior Court decisions. Yes, but the pleadings I think are very important, especially in the cases that the pleadings that you're filing are very important for our history.
I think we can work with you. Certainly, we have a lot of cases, and I think you're primarily looking at the ones that are either the high profile or the ones that have a significant impact on the government,
yes.
just as an administrative issue or cost-wise. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any more questions about the details of the budget, but I guess I just did want to thank all your divisions and to thank you. It's, again, bittersweet that you will be leaving the Attorney General's office. I think you've really shored up the divisions, and I think that they are, hoping that those divisions will stay in place so that the work that they are doing can continue. And I know that in the past we've seen Attorney Generals come in and maybe reorganize. And in its current condition or current status of the law, what types of reorganizations can occur in the Attorney General's office under the current law? I know you've asked for some changes in the statutes, and so our office is working on pushing some of those changes through. But what are the current conditions, and what types of reorgs could actually happen, and how would that impact the rest of the government?
I think it's primarily in the civil side, as well as with the family division. The civil side could be joined together by the next Attorney General, And I have always been of the opinion that the solicitor division and the litigation division need to be separate and apart in terms of their functioning. They cross over, there's no doubt that the work of a solicitor in taking a case from civil service and it ends up in court goes on to litigation. But I think the clear boundaries between the two helps the office to service the government much better. So, Senator, it would be for this legislature to be able to say there is a prosecution or criminal division, there is a litigation, there is a solicitor division, there is a family division. The family division under Carol's auspices right now, it's not just juvenile cases. She has done a marvelous job of bringing a high of 400 cases of kids brought into court significantly down because of restorative justice. And because of that work, she's been able now to take like a brother and sister relationship with the prosecution division when a defendant is admitted into mental health court. I like to take the prosecutor out of the mental health court treatment because the role of the prosecutor is done. The person has been adjudged NGI. And so the work needs to shift.
What is NGI?
Not guilty by reason of insanity, adjudicated mentally incompetent to stand trial. So I don't want the prosecutors having to deal with that. And it's shifted over now to the family division, and Carol works with the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center on those types of cases. And one of the cases is under baby Alexa. We do have, it's called the slapping baby case. And she is soon to serve her time. And once she is out of incarceration, we then take over through the family division and file a civil action to make sure she doesn't become a danger to the community anymore. And we continue to monitor her mental health progress through the Baby Alexa Act. So those types of assurances in the statute will make it clear that any other Attorney General that comes in could not disrupt that organizational process. But it's a policy call for the legislature to decide whether you want to take that from the next Attorney General or as a legislature to structure. If you're happy, if you like the way that this is structured, then you certainly as a policy can set this in place by law.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, if I may ask two more questions that I forgot. So back to the Solicitors Division then, yes, I did, I marked it down here. There's a lot that we've seen. Without a Solicitors Division, the agencies are crying for help every day, right? And I hate to say it, but I still hear a lot of this. And the agencies almost always say their procurement is being held up at the Attorney General's office. So it's not a GSA thing. Now it's the procurement that's been sent to the Attorney General's office. And do you see a backlog of procurement cases in your division?
I haven't, I'm actually covering for Carl, so I don't know the status of all our outstanding procurement cases, but I'm not aware personally of any that are backlogged, and we sometimes do get a lot, especially there's agencies would tend to send stuff closer to the end of the fiscal year where we try to get those out before the end of the fiscal year. So sometimes there's a rush. I know we sent out a circular advising agencies that they need to send it in timely so that we can get this review done properly and in time for the end of the fiscal year. But I personally am not aware of any backlog at this time.
All right. Attorney General, have you heard anything about this?
I've heard this all my life when I was Attorney General. It's sort of like if an agency doesn't want to take responsibility sometimes, it's at the Attorney General's office. And I, as Attorney General, I don't know about my predecessors, but I, as Attorney General, want to see all the agency matters coming in, as well as I want to see them going out, because when a director calls me, or anybody, if a senator calls me, wants to know where is this contract, where is this opinion request, I either know that it came in, I either know that we've already issued something. So it's very important to have that kind of working relationship with the agencies. A lot of times, there are occasions, it's not a perfect division, that there are delays. However, sometimes the delays are caused by our sending the contract, the procurement, the request back for additional work. And sometimes that can take 60 days, 60 to 90 days with the agency. But I think you hit the nail on the head. The mere fact that we have solicitors and that the Attorney General can at any point in time, I can call Shannon or Carl, where is this memorandum, this request that came in from the agency a month ago, where is it, and we can track it. That is the most important thing.
All right. If you don't mind, if you could just do a little bit of maybe, write up on that, just to so we all know and we're all talking facts instead of fiction. I'd like to know really how long does it take average, and I'm sure there are always exceptions. I'll tell you one. I'll give you two examples right now. One hasn't been that long, but I can't. And this is another thing. They are not allowing me to see contracts while they're being processed at the Attorney General's office. And do you find that to be any kind of, is that under some kind of
I'm not,
attorney-client privilege at that point?
I'm not aware of that, Senator.
All right.
Maybe
Okay.
they're just afraid to show you something before that we might just strike out because it's not
So
appropriate.
you don't incorporate that as a policy,
No,
that they're
no,
not
no.
allowed to to show anyone those contracts while they're being processed? Yes, please.
It's because it's draft, it's not finalized to the AG, and it's still in the procurement process that there would be problematic to release it prior to the governor signing it.
So that is a policy.
But if you're talking about employment type contracts.
No, I'm talking about procurement contracts, like RN.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, and then there's another, if you could just look into this, or I can send you separate, but there's a, rules and regs, review of rules and regulations. For example, the recycling fund, I think, or one of those from EPA. If does EPA have a designated lawyer from
It's
the
Assistant Attorney General Kristen Finney.
All right. Yeah. Every time I've asked, and I think it's been over a year because it was the last budget cycle when we started talking about it, and then recently we've talked about it again. I just want to follow up with those. So rules and regs also, if you could just give us an idea of how long those are really taking under the current setup that you have.
And we'll get back to you specifically on the EPA.
All right, and then finally, my final question, I promise, Mr. Speaker, is when they took the money out of the child support, is that illegal or is it not? Can you refresh my memory? Was there a finding or?
I also know the speaker had some very poignant suggestions as to what that was. I did not find a specific statute on that, but now we have the statute. So I think it's very, very clear now. I think it was ambiguous, but I appreciate the speaker very promptly getting that statute passed, yes.
All right.
It will be illegal now.
Okay. Well, again, Attorney General, thank you for your years of service in this office, and I'm sure we will be able to say that again before your actual departure, but thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Susan Mossy, it's very refreshing to listen to the progress that's made with regard to the restorative justice programs and how everything plays in and all of that. And I was very interested, Mr. Nishihara, in listening to what you were talking about restitution and how you actually go with the extra step of identifying what is an impediment to getting people to pay restitution because of lack of employment and the need for identification. Are most of the cases where these offenders no longer have identification when they're released, is it a result of expired identification or lack of identification?
Usually it's the lack of identification. So we have worked with the various departments, Revenue Tax, Public Health, the Department of Corrections, to create a MOU so when prisoners come out of jail, they can work toward getting an ID. Now there are some exceptions for those who were born not on Guam. But for those who were born on Guam, there is now a process, and it's only because we've been going to restitution court now about a year and a half, and the number one reason that the inmates say that they cannot secure a job is because they don't have identification. So we've worked to resolve that problem. The ones I'm talking about are the probationers. So now we've decided we want to tackle those victims who are whose offender go through the parole system. And I've told the AG that we're really ready to go, but with a caseload of 403 some, we estimate double because of speaking with them. I mean, we've been going to the parole board meetings, and we're just not equipped. So we're ready to kind of rock and roll to help victims out. I'm going to tell you, we lose money. So when I say we, the government of Guam loses money, I send an attorney out, and I may be paying him $40, $50 an hour. We send support outs, you know, so we run maybe a couple $100 an hour for that operation while they're in court. And in the meantime, you're lucky if you collect $25, $50, you know, for every fourth person that's there in restitution court. So we do lose money, but we're mandated to represent victims in the sense of collecting on their restitution.
I've actually been very interested in that topic, even with regard to people who are not born on Guam, and how we can remedy that, because I know that there's some efforts nationwide where they've addressed that very issue. But what I want to ask you too is if you're tracking recent legislation that was introduced with regard to the real ID and the requirements, because that might cause a bit of a stumbling block, I think, for efforts.
The ID that we are issuing is the Guam ID, not a driver's license. So the answer is I'm not sure about the real ID, and I know there was some new legislation, but no. So what we're doing is getting them an ID that with whatever process and ID system they use currently.
Okay. Thank you very much. And General Barrett Anderson, Sizus Maasi, for your continued service, and you will be sorely missed, madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple questions. First of all, I'd like to thank the Attorney General's office, and I understand that you'll be leaving. I guess no other way to put it, but no, I've learned a lot watching you, and you've truly been an inspiration for me. So thank you for being an outstanding role model for myself, and I'm sure many other women. I just wanted to know.
I think your grandmother was a role model for me.
Oh, so you're paying it forward. Are there any investigations currently open in regards to the Department of Corrections or any of our public safety agencies? If you could share that. I don't know if you're...
Well, I really can't talk about any open investigations to the extent they're not already in the public eye. So I'm going to have to decline on that.
Okay. So are there any investigations open that the public eye is aware of?
Whatever you see in the paper is what I'm actually prohibited by the rules from talking about these matters. So,
okay, I understand there was an investigation with one of the inmates being murdered in the prison. So I was wondering if that case was closed.
I believe there's two that are being reviewed. One was recently dismissed, okay. And although it was dismissed, you can imagine that work continues on it.
Okay.
And then there's a second one that is in the middle of intense litigation. There's a number of defendants there, and we have, I think, 3 prosecutors looking after that case, and there's been some severances. That means that they split the defendants away from each other because some of them say, you know, my constitutional rights require this. So that investigation continues. These actually criminal investigations, you'll be surprised to hear, I guess, that they can continue even into trial. And the nature of our work, of course, is, you know, we can't really discuss it until sort of after the fact.
Okay. There were some concerns during the earlier part of the year when we discovered that we were going for FY18, we were going to have a $67 million shortfall. And some of the questions that was presented by this body to the chief of police was the jurisdictional question of the partnerships between the airport police, the port police, it wasn't very clear in this hearing whether they were actually on the right side of the law. And so I just wanted to ask, was there any discussion about that jurisdictional issue? Were we, in fact, on the right side of the law?
You'll have to refresh my memory specifically about what we're talking about.
I thought I just did.
Well, I mean, it was kind of
So what happened was the chief of police made the call to shut down Agana precinct, move his officers to DOC to assist with the cost cutting of overtime, and then there was some kind of unwritten agreement between some of the other public safety agencies that they would act as police officers outside of their area of operation or their area of responsibility. So Port Police would now be a patrol officer under the operational command of GPD.
That issue was brought up. I was aware of it. You're concerned about whether, I'm not quite sure what your question is, but let me try and guess. Are you concerned whether employees of the Port Authority or any other law enforcement agency can be assigned to the Guam Police Department to do work?
Specifically the police officers.
If that is the question, then it is an administrative personnel question. There are certain requirements that need to be followed in doing that. Because if you're the park ranger and you are assigned to GPD and you don't have patrol skills, or you might as a park ranger, you need to be protected in your classified position for which you were hired for. Those issues started to come up, but it sort of went away once everybody went back to their agencies. So anytime someone moves to a different agency, there needs to be proper personnel work, protection for the employee, and detail assignments, etc. And if a person doesn't want to go, there should be a grievance process. I don't want to go to GPD. So I don't know if that answers your question. It had never come to a critical point of our office having to get even more involved, because I believe everyone went back to their agencies.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney General. I think you're saying it's kind of a gray area then, perhaps.
It has its personnel processes. Yeah. And if I were asked, I would tell an agency head, follow the personnel process, okay, and you'll be okay.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have no further questions, and I want to thank you for your presentation and for all your division heads for being here this afternoon to defend your budget. With that, we stand in recess until Tuesday morning at 10 when we meet with the University of Guam.
Okay. Thank you very much.